What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. And we have a commitment that we have to break down today. Liam McNeely, a 6'7", five-star top 10 prospect in the class of 2024, announced on Friday evening that he is going to be playing his college basketball for the UConn Huskies. For people that don't know who Liam McNeely is, he is a former commit at Indiana. There were rumors after he decommitted probably 2 months ago that it was going to be Kansas that he would end up at. He took a couple of other recruiting visits. There were a couple of other teams and programs that were in the mix for his services, but ultimately, after a visit that followed it up, the Jordan Brand Classic last weekend, he visited Monday and Tuesday and ended up committing on Friday, and he is about as good of a fit for UConn as you can find. We'll get down into this scouting report here in just a minute, but before we do, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast if you enjoy Top Dogs. The best way to support the product is to engage with it, whether that is subscribing on YouTube, whether that is leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or simply just sharing one of these videos or one of these episodes with a friend of yours that you know likes the UConn Huskies. So anything that you can do to engage with the content is very much appreciated. Best way to support this product. All right, let's get into it. Scouting report, Liam McNeely. As many people probably can assume, and many people probably know, the starting point for breaking down what Liam McNeely does is with his jump shot and with his ability as a shooter. He shot better than 40% from three for Mount Verde this past season. He shot better than 40% from three playing in the EYBL last spring and last summer. He is a catch and shoot guy. He is a movement shooter. He is somebody who, when they get their feet set, is elite. He is as good of a shooter as you're going to find in the freshman class, and that is something that I fully expect to be able to translate to the college level in year one. But he is more than just a shooter. Like, the shooting is what sets up the rest of his game. The shooting is what sets up his ability to put the ball on the floor and drive. The shooting is what allows him to be able to be a threat coming off of screens, because you have to chase him over pin downs. You have to chase him over staggers, right? His shooting is what allows him to be able to force you to close out long so he can pump fake and get to the basket, so that he can attack closeout, so that he gets a chance to kind of put the ball on the floor and find a way to be able to get to the rim. He is a really, really high IQ guy. If he's not the flashiest guy, but a guy that knows, a player that really understands who he is, what he is as a player, and where and how he can be effective. He's 6'7". He's able to shoot over the top of most of the guys that end up guarding him. And from what I've seen of him, and kind of from the scouting reports that I've seen or heard from people that have seen him much more than I have, is that he is a very, very high IQ guy that really understands what is asked of him, and kind of how to be effective within the role that he plays and within his specific skill set. You know, he is an exceptional passer, and not in the sense that he's going to be throwing these no-look dimes and kind of those ridiculous pocket passes. We're not going to be seeing like behind the back, anything flashy. It's probably not the stuff that's going to end up making SportsCenter top 10 when it comes to the way that he's able to throw the ball around the floor, but it's the right pass. It's the right swing. It is getting into the lane, drawing a defender, and then being able to find the right player based off of who is helping, right? It is coming off of a pin down or a curl and being able to read who is tagging or who is helping and finding a weak side shooter in the corner. He was, for long stretches of last season at Montverde, the guy that that program ran their offense through, despite the fact that they had a guy by the name of Cooper Flagg on that roster as well. At 6'7", he is strong. He's physical. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he is athletic enough. He is a good positional defender. He is a smart defender. He's not someone that is going to kind of do what Steph Castle does, where you isolate him on the best player on the opposing team, or have him guard a point guard for 94 feet. And kind of forget about everything else that you have to do and just kind of let him go out and cook. He's a good positional guy. He's going to be in the right spots on the floor. He'll probably be someone at the start of his college basketball career that can be targeted. And hopefully by the time that the end of his career comes, whether that's 1 season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons or whatever it is, he is someone that is much better defensively. I get a lot of Alex Karaban vibes from him in terms of the way that he'll be used next season. But I'm also going to read you a scouting report from Adam Finkelstein, who works for 24/7 Sports, who's one of the best evaluators in the business and a guy that knows the UConn program well. And this is what he said, quote, "He doesn't have the ideal physical measurables of a prototypical five-star prospect, but he is one of the most consistently productive and reliable basketball players in this class." And if you hear that and don't immediately think of the name Cam Spencer, then I don't know what to tell you, and I don't know what you've been watching over the course of the last year. I think that's probably why I'm so high on what McNeely's fit is going to end up being for this program, because of what his skill set is, because of the way that we just saw it work with a guy like Cam Spencer, and because of the fact that the things that Liam does well fit really, really, really well within the offense that UConn wants to run. Now, let's be very clear about something. Cam Spencer was a fifth-year senior, a 23-year-old that's going to end up playing in the NBA at some point next season, right? Liam McNeely is an 18-year-old turning 19 as a freshman in college basketball. I do not expect him to come in, and you should not expect him to come in and average 15 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists on shooting splits of 48% from the floor, 44% from three, and 91% from the three-point line. Cam Spencer last year played at an All-American level. He was a first-team All-Big East player. He got votes for Big East Player of the Year, and there are going to be people that will tell you, rightfully so, that Cam Spencer was an All-American caliber guy last season. I don't think Liam McNeely is going to be at that level. What I do expect is a guy that will be probably, and he'll be an all rookie team player in the Big East. I think that he will get some votes when it comes to all Big East, to the point where we're talking about potentially maybe like an honorable mention all Big East kind of a guy. And somewhere in the neighborhood of like 11 or 12 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, a couple of assists per game, shooting 40% from three, being a valuable cog defensively, and a guy that is playing better basketball and getting more minutes by the end of the year than he was at the start of the season. I think that if you kind of look at the impact that Alex Karaban had in his first season, the role that he played is what I think would be the ideal role for Liam McNeely next season. I think that his usage is going to be a little bit more similar to what Cam Spencer's usage was, in terms of how he's used within the offense and the sets that he takes part in, and the actions that this staff utilizes him in. But you kind of get the idea of what this guy's ability is, what this guy's skill set is, and kind of what his ceiling is as a player. Now, um, I do think my understanding of the situation is that he sacrificed money. Well, maybe sacrifice is the wrong word, but he turned down a higher offer from other programs to come to UConn. And I think that right there tells you a lot about where the value of what this program has been the last 2 years where we will really see the impact of it, right? Uh, I believe, and I said this on After Dark on Thursday night, and hopefully some UConn fans heard what I had to say about Goodman about this, but I think that the value of developing a player like a Cam Spencer, developing a player like a Tristan Newton, and probably we'll talk about this more in a second, but developing a guy like Alex Karaban to the point where this year's starting five all looks likely to either be drafted or to land some kind of free agent deal where they will be, if they want to, in Karaban's case, playing in the NBA next year, following Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson, and Adama Sanogo to the league from the year before, has allowed teams to realize, like, this is the place you want to go to parlay college success into a chance to play professional basketball at the highest level. I think that will allow guys to understand that if we're taking let's just say it's a $400,000 pay cut for Liam McNeely. I'm just throwing that number out there. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but if it's, let's just say, a couple $100,000 that Liam McNeely is turning down from a higher program to come to UConn, that he understands he will make that back 10, 20, 30 times as much in the next couple of years because of the success that this staff will set him up for moving forward long term. And I think that right there is the importance of having success at this level. And that right there is the value in being able to develop players and prioritizing the growth of somebody like a Tristan Newton over multiple seasons, or somebody like an Alex Karaban over 2.5, potentially 3.5 seasons. So let's talk about Karaban here for a second, because he has declared for the draft since the last time that we talked. And I do think that it's the right decision for him to declare. I do think that he needs to go through this process as if he is going to stay in the NBA draft. And I fully believe that his floor at the next level is as like a rotational piece, a bench piece, a guy that's going to give you 10 to 15 minutes a game as a shooter, as a fairly switchable defender, and as somebody that is a valuable connective piece because of all the little things that he can do. I think he's gotten much, much better defensively over the course of the last 15 months. In January and February of his first season playing, he was a guy that you could attack on the defensive end of the floor. I think we saw in the Final Four, specifically last year, that he was much, much, much better switching on to smaller players and being able to stay in front and contest. He had a bunch of blocks on jump shots. There's a very vivid one in my mind in the second half of the game against Alabama, where he kept Mark Sears in front and ended up blocking a three from Mark Sears. And, you know, I do think that things like that really caught the eye of NBA evaluators. And I think that he is always going to be that player. If he comes back to school, if he leaves now, like, you kind of know the floor of what you're getting when you draft Alex Karaban. The question that I think he needs to decide on is whether or not returning to school will allow him an opportunity to be a top 20, top 25 kind of a draft pick, where if he's the guy that has the breakout that we saw from Adama Sanogo sophomore to junior year, from Jordan Hawkins freshman to sophomore year, from Donovan Clingan freshman to sophomore year, from Tristan Newton as a junior to a senior, right? If he's the guy this year that, if he comes back to school, reaches the next level as a player and goes from being a really good college basketball player to an all-American level college basketball player, if he's the guy that goes from being a good piece on a good team to the star of a very, very good team, will that be enough to get him to the point where he can be drafted in the 2025 draft as a guy that is going to get 9 or 8 figures of guaranteed dollars as a first-round pick? Now, the situation as it stands for most NBA draft guys is, if you're like picked in the mid 40s in the second round, like the 30s to the mid 40s, you're probably going to get some level of guaranteed money. Guys that are drafted in the 30s will get something like a 3-year contract. Sometimes you get a 4-year contract. If it's a 3-year deal, it's like a year and a half guaranteed with like a team option for the third season. If it's a 4-year deal, some guys get 3 years guaranteed. Some guys get like 2.5 guaranteed. Some guys get 2 guaranteed with, with upside there. There's other guys that will get 2-way deals off of that, and the 2-way deals end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of what the league minimum is, and the league minimum will be somewhere in the neighborhood of like $1 million this year. So if Alex Karaban is picked in the 30s or mid 40s, you're probably looking at a situation where like the expectation will be between 500,000 and $1 million that he could earn playing professionally next year. It could end up being something where he gets $2 million guaranteed over the course of 2 seasons. It could end up being something where what he gets is a 2-way where it's not guaranteed that he's able to maximize the money that you get out of the 2-way. Maybe it's something where you get 150 or 200,000, whatever it is. He's going to be playing, and I feel very comfortable saying, if he leaves, he will play in an NBA game next year. He will be getting paychecks from the NBA, whether that's on a 2-way, whether that's a G League deal, whether that's playing for the NBA team. The question that he has to ask, and I don't think that we can answer this right now. I think that this is something where he needs to sit down with his family, with the coaching staff, with his agents, with the people whose opinion that he trusts after going through the whole process, like he is going to get drafted. And he needs to kind of sit down and say, okay, I can make X amount of dollars coming back and playing at UConn next year with NIL. I can make X plus Y amount of dollars playing in the NBA next year. Is that difference worth it to be able to pass on to come back and have the opportunity to potentially play your way into getting, let's just say 10 million guaranteed as the 22nd pick in the draft over 4 years or something like that, right? So that's the decision that he's probably going to end up having to make. And it's all going to depend on what he wants to do, whether or not he is done with college, how much does he value potentially having a UConn degree when all of this is said and done, where he's going to end up getting picked. Like if there's a team that comes in after this whole draft process and says, hey, look, we are going to take you with the 35th pick, whether like if you are there, we are taking you with the 35th pick. You might get drafted higher than that. We might not end up with you, but if you are there at 35, we are taking you at 35. And that happens, he probably has to go. If he looks more like a late second round pick or one of these guys that will be undrafted, a lot of the drafted versus undrafted stuff is agents telling teams not to draft them because they won't sign with them. So that the 45 to 60 range can get a little bit hairy. But if he finds himself in that range where they are saying you're probably going to be a G League guy with two-way upside, that might be one where you really got to think about potentially coming back to school. So, well, then there's a real chance that he could end up being like the 28th pick this year. There's a lot of moving parts in terms of where he will end up getting picked. And if he were to ask me for advice, my best advice would be go attack this draft process like you are going to be in the league next year, like you are staying in it. And if you get the feedback that you want, and you find yourself comfortable with the potential worst case scenario, then go, man, go enjoy it, go live your dream, go make it. I have very little doubt that he'll find a way to be able to carve out a job for himself playing professional basketball at some level, making quite a bit of money for a long time because of how good he is. And if he's not comfortable after going through that whole process with what the worst case scenario could be, then your opportunity to come back is going to be there. And you're going to be a guy that a lot of people pick as a potential All-American on a team that's going to end up being a top 5 preseason team with a chance to be able to step into a starring role at a school that has won back-to-back championships. Maybe you win 3 in a row. Maybe you go down as one of the legends of college basketball as a result of it. And you're going to be able to make some money coming back to school, enough where you will be able to live very comfortably in Storrs, Connecticut, next season. So there's no bad options for Alex Karaban, and that makes me really happy because he's a really, really good kid and somebody that I will be rooting for, whether that's wearing a UConn jersey next year or whether that's wearing an NBA jersey next year. So all good options for him, which is something that's great to hear. And yeah, go out and attack the draft process like this is the end of your college basketball career. That's the only way that you could do it in that situation. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay booster too from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Whether you are a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. After a 6-month season loaded with cross-country travel, I can promise you that proper recovery is a priority for me these days. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Field of 68. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New Jersey or at one of the hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. If you're interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself, go to unifiedhealing.com/unified68 to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/UNIFYD, the number 6, the number 8. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including the EE system. All right, let's talk about some of these potential transfers that we have coming into college, because one of the things that happened over the weekend was Aiden Mahaney finished his visit. Kobe Brea took his visit. There were rumors out there that both of those guys were going to end up committing on the same day that Liam McNeely ended up committing, and obviously neither of that happened. Aiden Mahaney took his visit to Kentucky. I believe while I am recording this, that Kobe Brea is on his visit to Kentucky, and both of those guys are wanted by that program for a lot of different reasons. But I do think that it's not as simple as saying go out and get the commitments from all of the best transfers that you can possibly get commitments from, because it goes a little bit deeper than that. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what these two guys are. Kobe Brea, I think, is the obvious one, right? He is the elite of the elite of the elite when it comes to being a jump shooter. He's 6'6". As one A10 coach put it to me, he drills shots. A little shocked he's being recruited at the level that he is, but if the ball hits his hands and he's open, it goes in. So it's kind of obvious, right? You get a 6'6" dude that's good enough on the defensive end that can shoot the absolute piss out of it. You go and you try to get that guy. There's a reason why his list was Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, and UConn. And depending on who you talk to, some of them will say that that wasn't what the actual recruiting list was. There was a while where it only looked like Duke and UConn were going to end up getting visits. The Duke visit, it doesn't look like that is going to happen as of right now. The Kentucky visit is happening, and obviously the UConn visit happens. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. But if he ends up committing, and if he's okay with probably being a sixth man coming in, is I think the ideal role for him, then I think when you can get a 6'6" shooter that makes him the way that Kobe Brea makes him, you have to go out and get the 6'6" shooter that makes him the way that Kobe Brea makes them. I totally get his fit within this offense, and as long as he's accepting of the role that he's going to be asked to play, I think that his value is evident there. I'm not quite as sold on Aiden Mahaney. I think the ability is there. You know, he's a guy that is very, very good operating in ball screens. He was in the 88th percentile according to Synergy in ball screens, including passes. He was in the 85th percentile, according to Synergy, as the ball handler and ball screens, and a guy coming off of ball screens and being the scorer. That's his strength. You know, Randy Bennett's offense at St. Mary's is one of the best ball screen offenses in college basketball. He consistently has some of the best ball screen operators in college basketball at the point guard spot for him, and Aiden Mahaney is no different than all of that. He's 6'3", he's 180 pounds. You can kind of squint your eyes and see similarities between what Tristan Newton was as a player, probably the later end of the 2023 season, and what Aiden Mahaney is as a player coming in at the start of the 2024-25 season. He's got 2 years of eligibility left, which is something that I know this staff values, so you get more than just one season out of him. And if he arrives on campus and he's here for 2 years, I would not be shocked to see Aiden Mahaney as a first team All Big East guy, potentially an All American as a senior in his last year here. So I very much understand why the staff likes him. I kind of get the profile fit. I think it's good process where when you go through the portal, you end up on a player like Aiden Mahaney based off of what UConn's offense is. He did take a little bit of a step back this past season in terms of his efficiency and some of his scoring numbers. But I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Logan Johnson's graduation impacted St. Mary's a little bit more than people that didn't watch that team a ton realize. And it meant that he went from being uh, a guy that was guarded by the second best perimeter defender to being the guy that was the focal point of every offensive scouting report that he was going to see. And I think it took a while for him to kind of find a way to adjust to that. The talent level is there. That's not what I'm concerned about. What I would be, and maybe concerned is too strong, right? But where I think this staff has to do their homework and has to do their due diligence is on the fact that you got a kid that grew up in the town next to Moraga, right? He's from Lafayette, California. That's the town right next to Moraga, California. That's where St. Mary's is. He's a local kid that grew up a St. Mary's fan, that was the priority recruit for St. Mary's, that went and played basically in his hometown for 2 years with his family around, where you could drive home and go get a home cooked meal anytime that you wanted, right? Like he was basically, he played at home for 2 years in California, in the West Coast Conference, a little bit off the national radar, where the spotlight isn't quite on you the way that it is when you're playing for the back-to-back national champions. Now, you go across the country, you're 6 hours by flight away from home. And that's not including the amount of time it takes to actually get from stores to an airport that can fly you to California, right? If you're flying out of Bradley, I don't know how many directs they got to San Francisco out of Bradley, but I can't imagine that it's that many. And you're going to go from being coached by somebody on the West Coast to being coached by some absolute lunatics that are on the UConn coaching staff. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've been in every St. Mary's practice for the last year, but I can promise you that it's going to be a different level of intensity, a different level of coaching, a different level. Not to say that Randy Bennett's a good coach, but a different style of coaching, and a completely different culture that he's going to be walking into. And if you're going to bring in a player like that, you got to be 100% sure that he has the ability to operate in that system. Now, he doesn't have to be the same personality type as a Cam Spencer, as a Dan Hurley, or as a Kamani Young, right? But he does have to be someone that can handle that level of coaching. I think the one thing we learned from and I think that Dan Hurley will learn this, and I think he's been public about this, is that with Tristan Newton, he kind of figured out he doesn't have to have a guy that is wired the same way and that is as demonstrative and expressive in his competitiveness as Hurley and Young and Luke Murray and Cam Spencer and some of these other guys, right? To have a guy like that be effective, I think it opens what your recruiting pool is. But you also got to make sure that the guy that you're targeting that isn't as expressive and that isn't as overtly as much a part of what that culture and as overtly as good of a fit within that culture, within that style, or within that program, you got to make sure you do your due diligence to make sure that that kid is not going to get run over and has the mental fortitude to be able to handle it. And I've met Aiden Mahaney before. I've interviewed him multiple times. We hung out he hung out on set with us at the WCC Media Day this past year in Vegas. He's played at a very high level. He's won a lot of games. They won the WCC last season, beating Gonzaga. So he's played basketball at a very high level. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know his psychological makeup and his ability to handle that level of coaching the way that the people that have coached him in high school and the way that his parents and the way that his AAU guys and the way that the staff members on St. Mary's will know. So all I'm saying is that you got to be able to put in the homework that you need to make sure that he's the right fit. And I think that if the staff is recruiting him, they believe that there's a good chance that he is the right fit. I also believe that if he left his UConn visit to go take a Kentucky visit without committing or without having the staff accept the commitment, then I think it's something where they may not be 100% sold on the idea. So that's going to be one to watch and one to keep an eye on. But if he does arrive on campus, you're getting a very, very talented player. That maybe that's the wrong. You're getting a very good player whose talents fit what UConn needs out of a point guard in that role. Because let's be frank, man, like UConn needs point guard help. I was talking with someone the other day who said that they were worried about the depth up front, and I'm not worried about the depth up front. I think one, I'm higher on Terrace Reed than I think a lot of people are. I think he's, I get very heavy freshman into sophomore year vibes, Adama Sanogo out of him, and I think that he can take a big, big leap with the summer of coaching, a junior year under his belt, and then another summer of coaching in a senior season with this staff and with this level of player development. I think that the ability is there with Terrace Reed. So I'm excited about him potentially coming into this program and potentially being a guy that can really impact the front line. And then Sampson is just such a dynamic athlete. I wouldn't mind seeing him get an opportunity to be the guy at the 5 and lean a little bit more into like some of the length and athleticism that does exist on this roster. So that'll be a fun one to watch. But to me, the point guard spot is one where you need someone else. You need another piece there, right? Hassan Diarra is awesome at what he does. And to me, having him be the change of pace guy, the player that will allow you to press, that can help guard another point guard 94 feet, that can be a harasser defensively, that makes the open shots, that is your kind of secondary ball handler. I think he is exceptional in that role. And I think that Amon Noel is a guy that has a very, very bright upside in terms of being like a 2 to 3 year player within this program. Like you watch him play, he is a bowling ball. He is tough. He is physical. I've gotten Kyle Lowry comparisons before talking to people that have seen him play quite a bit in Philly. And I can see it a little bit, but he's also a freshman coming into college basketball. And I'm always hesitant to buy into the idea that a guy that's not a top 5 caliber talent can step in and impact at the level you want them to impact, especially when there's a point guard. So I think that if you you need one more guy that can be a ball handler and kind of be there's 8 seconds left in the shot clock, we need someone to go get us one kind of a guy. And I think that that's why the staff is looking at Mahaney in that role. And then there's a glut on the wing. So I kind of want to let's do this little thought exercise here. Let's pretend that Kobe Bryant and Aiden Mahaney both end up committing to UConn. If I had to bet, my gut is that they don't end up with both of them. I don't know if the staff necessarily wants both of them, but just for the point of having of doing this exercise, let's pretend that both of them commit. This is what the roster ends up looking like, right? At the guard spots, you have Hassan Diarra, Amon Noel, Aiden Mahaney, and Solo Ball, who are basically there to kind of play the 80 minutes that you get at the guard spots. I would guess that Hassan, Aiden, and Solo end up getting the majority of the minutes, and especially early on, you're looking at like 10 minutes a game for Ahmad Noel. And if he adjusts well, then you see him start getting like 15 to 20 minutes off the bench. And if it doesn't work, then you probably see him a little bit more on the Solo Ball developmental path. But I think it's those 4 guys in the backcourt. At the 5 spot, you got Terrace Reed, Samson Johnson with Yusuf Sangare cleaning up the rest of the minutes. And I think that's more than enough, which means at the 3 and 4, you basically have Liam McNeely, Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, Isaiah Abraham, and Kobe Brea there to split 80 minutes between the five of them. And that's before you assume the possibility of Alex Karaban coming back and immediately eating up a good 30 to 34 of those minutes, right? So all of a sudden you're losing like a good 40% of your minutes at the 3 and 4 if you get Alex Karaban back. And I understand why college basketball fans get enamored with the transfer portal. I understand why they want to go out and just stockpile a bunch of talent. But I do think that when you go out and you reload in the portal with 3, 4, 5, 6 guys every year, you potentially risk the core guys that will be the next Andre fucking Jackson, the next Jordan Hawkins, the next Adama Sanogo, the next Donovan Clingan, the next Tristan Newton, the next Alex Karaban, the guys that will carry the torch and be your culture setters, the guys that will provide the blueprint for the player development within the program that allows you to be able to get players at a bargain basement price in the market, in the world of Arkansas having like 5 million of NIL to spend, and Louisville having millions of NIL to spend, and Kentucky having millions of NIL to spend, and Indiana having millions of NIL to spend, right? Um, Culture is such a delicate and important balance, right? It's so valuable to be able to have guys come through the program and take ownership of the program, right? To have a players led program. And I know all of this stuff is cliche, but I do, it's hard for me not to look at Kansas right now, right? In 2022, when they won the national title, DeJuan Harris was a culture guy, right? Oshai Abaji was a culture guy that ended up playing in the league. Christian Brown was a culture guy that ended up being a top 20 pick and is now playing an important role for an NBA champion, right? Jalen Wilson was a transfer, but he was there for long enough to be a culture guy. David McCormick was a transfer, but he was there long enough to be a culture guy. And if you look at what happened last year, they had Kansas had like 8 guys transfer out of the program prior to last season, and you bring in a bunch of big name transfers, specifically Hunter Dickinson, and it kind of did not go as smoothly as I think a lot of people expected it to go. And then this year, they're kind of doing the same thing again, right? Like you're going to get DeJuan Harris back, you're going to get KJ Adams back, you got Hunter Dickinson back, and then they're adding 4 more pieces to the mix. And what you lose there is the ability to promote from within. And I do think that having that is part of why UConn was what they were last year, right? We saw Tristan Newton go from being basically the 4th option, maybe the 5th option even, to being the All-American. We saw Alex Karaban go from being a guy that was the 5th starter to being a very important role player. You saw Donovan Clingan step up into the role of the 6th man off the bench to being the star that UConn was able to build their defense around. And I think that if you bring in 2 more transfers in addition to Liam McNeely, you risk the possibility of maybe Jalen Stewart says, you know what? This ain't for me. I'm not trying to play 10 minutes a game off the bench. I'm going to go transfer, find somewhere immediate that I can play, go try to get 25 minutes a game at like an ACC school or something like that, or maybe go back to Washington and I kind of go from there. Maybe Jaden Ross says, I don't want to sit here and not play again for another year. Maybe Solo Ball says, I don't see where I'm going to get the minutes. I'm going to transfer to Maryland or whatever it is, or to Georgetown. And you lose those guys that specifically Solo and Jalen Stewart, I think have a chance to be all Big East players, potentially even this season. Like, I don't think that is crazy to say that they can make it to that level. And losing the opportunity to have them and let them be at a point where they take the ownership of the program is a very risky thing to do. Because once you start losing those culture guys, then instead of having players within the program that can establish that already, you're relying entirely on the coaching staff to be able to do that. And there's going to be times that they can make it work. There's also going to be times where it doesn't quite work. And it only takes like 1 or 2 bad apples to spoil the bunch, right? And I've said this before, I think that I think you can have one shithead on the roster and still be just fine. It's when like that shithead finds his shithead partner and they start doing a whole bunch of shithead things, and all of a sudden a bunch of these other guys that aren't shitheads decide that they're going to be shitheads because those shitheads look like they're having a lot of fun, and then all of a sudden you got a team full of shitheads and it's just not going to work, right? um so I think you have to be really, really smart and careful with it, but it's the balance between being able to develop guys within your system that understand what they're doing, that so that you have the cliche coaches on the floor, so you have the players teaching themselves in summer workouts, right? Where you have that level of expectation within the program that isn't just set by the coaching staff. All of that stuff is really, 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 really valuable. It's also really, 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 really valuable to supplement uh in the portal in places that you know you're going to be weak, like for example at the lead guard spot for UConn this year, like for example at the 5 spot this year for UConn. So I think, I know the staff has had these conversations, but I think that is a very important balance that they need to strike, and that's why you're not seeing them go out and say, give me this dude, give me this dude, give me this dude, give me this dude, when you're UConn and you've won back to back and you could pretty much get anybody that you want out of the portal. So just something to keep in mind, and just something to kind of have in the back of your head as we finish up this portal cycle and you see some of the names that end up committing to UConn. But listen, until then, until that moment, hopefully we're going to have news on at least one more player committing to the program here relatively soon. Hopefully it won't be within like the next hour or so they don't have to go back and re-record something. Again, I already had to re-record this because some of us were dumb enough to leave our microphones on mute the first time that we tried to knock this out. So until then, we are going to be talking a little bit more about UConn, hopefully later in the week. And if you are listening to this, tune in Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, 9 p.m. We'll have episodes of After Dark. We will absolutely be talking about Liam McNeely on a field of 68 after dark on Tuesday night. See you guys then. And maybe eventually you'll hear more from me about some of these other transfer prospects committing to the Huskies. By now, you guys have surely heard about Autograph, an app founded by Tom Brady with the intention of disrupting the way that fans consume content covering their favorite teams. Here's how the app works. All of the podcasters and bloggers and digital creators covering a team have their content sent to that team's page in Autograph. Instead of having to bounce from site to site or try to navigate the only safe for work spaces that are left on X, you just scroll through Autograph. This isn't a hard sell. This is the truth. I'm a UConn fan. I use the Autograph app to keep up with the writers I read and the pods that I listen to. The best part is that every piece of content that you consume gives you reward points. The more you get, the more chances you have at things like discounted tickets and signed memorabilia. Here's the best part. We've partnered with Autograph to donate $1 to the V Foundation every time someone downloads the app using the code F68, with a minimum of $2,500 getting donated. The app is free, so download using the code F68 and help us raise some money and give Autograph a try. I promise you it will be worth it. And while we're here, a quick reminder, make sure that you subscribe to the Daily. We have new landing pages with deep dives into each coaching change, as well as a tracker that provides scouting reports on the transfers that have entered the portal that you are going to want to know about. It's just $50 for the year, which means that for less than $1 per week, you get analysis that our insiders send direct to your inbox every single morning. Hit the link below to subscribe. It's time to talk about Vaulted. Vaulted is an app that allows you to store your predictions now and forever. It also allows you to challenge your friends to prove that your takes are, in fact, smarter than theirs. But what makes Vaulted great is that it allows you to keep all the receipts that you need to prove that your friends are not as smart as they think they are. With that in mind, let's roll through the 5 worst Vaulted predictions that were made on the field of 68 after dark this season. On November 6th, Jeff Goodman predicted that St. Mary's would make it back to the Final Four. They lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. On November 29th, it was predicted that Arkansas would win the SEC. They finished 12th out of 14 teams. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 28th, it was predicted that Memphis would make it to the Final Four. They did not make the NCAA tournament. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 13th, it was predicted that Michigan State would win the Big Ten. They finished in 6th place. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 29th, it was predicted that Miami would return to the Final Four this season. They finished 14th out of 15 teams in the ACC. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. So download the Vaulted app that's spelled VLTED from the App Store now and start keeping all of those receipts.